Islamedu.
Dear Islamedu platform followers, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to a new episode of our show, Revert Stories. This time, I have a great honor to introduce you my new guest on the show. He is a well-known professor from the United States of America. He received his bachelor's degree from Georgetown University in 2000 and his doctorate in Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations from the University of Chicago in 2006. He has studied and conducted research in countries such as Egypt, Syria, Turkey, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, South Africa, India, Indonesia, and Iran. He holds the Alwaleed bin Talal Chair of Islamic Civilization at Georgetown University. He is Professor Jonathan Brown. Professor Brown, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalam.
At the very beginning, I would like to welcome you to Sarajevo in our studio. It is great pleasure and honor to have an opportunity to talk to you about Islam and your path to Islam. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for inviting me. I am always happy to come to Sarajevo. I've now been here a lot of times.
Yeah,
God.
glad to hear that.
I really enjoy it. I've been coming here for now 11 years.
Yeah, mashallah.
It's changed so much. Like there's new roads. I've been coming here so long that I actually noticed changes in the city. Alhamdulillah. So I'm very grateful to be here.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up in beginning of my life for a couple of years in Senegal, in Dakar. My father was working there, and then we moved to Washington, D.C., actually suburban Maryland, so right outside Washington, D.C., but basically in the city.
Yeah, I understand.
The metropolitan area. And then I lived there until I went to high school. And I went to high school, and my father sent me to boarding school because he wanted me to build character. He sent me to boarding school. I went to high school in California, near Santa Barbara, California, a very nice part of the country. And then I went to college at Georgetown University, so I came back to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And then I went to Egypt for a year. And then I went to Chicago to study at University of Chicago.
Yeah.
And then I moved. My first job is a professor in Seattle at the University of Washington for 4 years. And then I came back to Georgetown in 2010. I've been there ever since.
Yeah. In your childhood, did you have religious education, maybe through a religious institution or in some other way? Did religion actually take place in your life?
So, it was actually, it's kind of weird. So my dad was raised Episcopalian Christian, which is it's basically the American version of Anglicanism, so Anglican Protestantism. It's kind of high Protestantism, almost like Catholicism, but no Pope and not so many statues. I guess there's still a lot of statues. So then it's weird. I had a weird family religious environment because we went to church every Sunday, me and my sisters. My dad took us to church every Sunday, and we were acolytes. So that means there were these like kids who help. They carry the cross, they carry the flag, they help. And as you get older, you help the minister prepare the communion. So we did this, all the way up through when I was a teenager. And I went to Sunday school and everything, but two things. One, there was you only had religion on Sunday at church. Like at home, we never talked about God or religion or anything like that. It was like completely absent in our house. And then also, I think I feel bad criticizing them, but I think my Sunday school teachers were not very good or something because I didn't really understand anything about my religion. I believed in God, but I didn't really know anything else about Christianity, even though I technically studied it. So then I went to high school in California, and there it was very kind of, you can imagine sort of movies about California, kind of spirituality, sort of slightly Zen Buddhist, slightly crystal power, slightly, whatever makes you a good person type feeling. That was, so there was no really religious content in my high school.
So in that teenage years, you didn't have much of.
Yeah, I remember, but I was very, I guess maybe like a lot of teenagers, I'm not sure if this is normal or not, but I mean, I had a lot of anxiety about my existence. I wanted to know what the meaning of my life was. So I used to, our school was like on the edge of a forest and mountains.
Yeah.
And so I would go into the mountains and the forest and like, I don't want to say meditate because that sounds like I knew what I was doing, but I would sort of go and just walk in nature and think about these topics. So I think I really was wanted to know the truth.
Yeah.
And I was eager to know it, but I didn't have anybody to help me.
Yeah. Through your speaking, I noticed that religion actually meant to you a lot in that period of time. What did religion?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I don't know. When I was young, I remember I had belief in God, but I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't really know how to express it or what it meant. But I remember, for example, one time, like my mother was not religious, and like I remember she would not come to church. It was my dad would take us to church, and then I remember like they have these wafers, like the communion wafer. It's like this, like kind of like a little cookie almost.
Yeah.
And then you can either like take that and then drink the wine. That's how I knew, by the way, that I was probably going to be an alcoholic, which thank God I'm not. Which is because I loved the communion wine a lot. But you could take it and you could dip it, or you could dip it in the wine and you could eat that. So I remember one time I was so afraid for my mother that I took like I stole like an extra wafer and I dipped it in the wine and I hid it in my pocket so that when I got home, I could give it to my mother. And I thought that would like save her or something. So that's a kind of, it wasn't very sophisticated thinking that I had.
Yeah. So how did you first encounter Islam?
Yeah. So I went to university at Georgetown, and by the time I'm so grateful that God like created in my heart desire for knowledge. When I finished high school, I was so eager to sort of start my intellectual life. I was so eager to learn. I really was so excited to go to college and learn. I mean, I know it sounds kind of cheesy to say that, but I really was excited to learn. And I took, at Georgetown, you have to take, because it's a Catholic university, it's very liberal Catholic. I mean, you would go there and you may not even know that you're at a Catholic university, but it's a Catholic university, so you have to take 2 philosophy classes and you have to take 2 theology classes. And the first theology class you can take is either Introduction to Biblical Literature or Problem of God. I took Introduction to Biblical Literature. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting, but I kind of felt like this is not, I don't have like a connection. I don't want to build my life on this text. I just felt like it's not intact. It wasn't historically preserved. So I didn't feel like there was this truth was preserved in that book. And then the second semester of my freshman year, my first year of college, I was like, oh, I'll take my second theology class. And I was looking through the course catalog, and there was a class called Islamic Thought and Practice. And I was like, oh, Islam. It's funny. I actually remember this thought. And I remember saying to myself, oh, Islam, camels and terrorists, that'll be fun and interesting, I didn't know anything about Islam. So I took that class. I was like, oh, this will be exciting, whatever, interesting. So I remember I went to the class, and the professor was the niece of a famous scholar who's associated with this institution. His name is Ismail Farouqi. He was Palestinian. He died in the 1980s. But his niece, her name was Maysam al-Farouqi. And she was teaching this class. And she's the first day of class, she said, okay, I'm ask you to step into the shoes of a Muslim like you're going to learn from the perspective of a Muslim. And we read, I don't know if people, your audience knows this, but one book we read that really had an impact on me was The Road to Mecca by Muhammad Asad. And then we also read the kind of translation of the Quran by Muhammad Asad, or, sections of it. And at some point, I remember in the class, like thinking, this is actually what I believe. This is all what I've always believed. Like when I was in church and I didn't really understand what was happening, believed in God. When I was like in the mountains in California, this is what I've always believed, what I'm hearing. And so I started to think, that's kind of interesting. And then so I went to the professor at the end of the semester and I said, I think this is actually the same as what I believe. And does that make me a Muslim? And then she said, that's a decision you have to make. So then that summer, after my first year of college, I went with my friend Charles. We traveled in Europe, and we went to Morocco, and I went to Russia to work at an internship. And then I thought a lot about I stopped eating pork, and I stopped drinking alcohol. And then in the fall, I went to the Muslim Student Association dinner at my university, and I was very shy, and I kind of was like, so I'm interested in becoming Muslim. And then they helped me, and I became Muslim in the fall of 1997, I guess.
Yeah. So I would like to know, what was your first impression of Islam on those classes? What, beside that, you thought, like, this is what I believe. What else did cross your mind?
So it's interesting because my experience was it was totally intellectual. I had I didn't know any Muslims. I didn't have any, I never really I grew up in a Muslim country in my life, but I didn't, I didn't have any exposure. I never went to a mosque. I never knew Muslims or anything. So it was very intellectual. I remember one thing was being surprised by was that, you're not asked to surrender your reason. You're asked to use reason. Like you're asked to think, to reflect on the world, to think what's reasonable, what's logical. So that was really surprising to me. And I think that, I don't know, I don't like to, speak badly about other religions. I don't think it's productive, but I would just say, because I think this is just my experience, but I would say my experience growing up in going to the Sunday school I went to was not one that encouraged using reason. It was just sort of kind of intellectually empty. And I think in some ways it's a bit unfair. I mean, I'm just saying this as a scholar, because I think it's important to say this, which is I think the Christian tradition actually does have a tremendous intellectual heritage, one that a lot of which is actually shared with Islam, the same kind of theological and philosophical thinking. But that was not represented when I grew up. So I think hearing and learning that, God doesn't ask you to surrender your reason. God asks you to use your reason. That really surprised me. I think that kind of got my attention. And then I think another thing that was really important to me was the intact nature of the Quran. That the Quran was, I wanted to base my life on something true. I wanted to base my life on something reliable, not on like stories or myths or I understand, historical productions. I wanted, even if what I based my life on was hard to understand, it had to be authentic. Yeah. And so when I learned about the Quran and the way the Quran was collected and preserved, I was like, wow, this is really, that's what I would require. And Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because like sometimes I think about it, it's hard to remember why like how I felt when I first became Muslim, because, you go through so many different stages in your life, and how I think now might be very different than then.
Yeah. So when you decided that Islam is the path, the way you want to take, you want to go that way, what was your life like after that? Was it difficult to start applying something or stop doing something you did before? Or
yeah, it's funny. I think I have a friend who converted to Islam maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and he's about my age, so he was in his, or maybe a little bit younger. He was in his late 30s, and he had like a child, and he's married, and I just kept thinking to myself how if I were to make a decision like that now, it would be, the first thing that would come to my mind is like, how's my wife going to feel? How's my family going to react? Like, but when I became Muslim, I was like a free agent. I had no attachments. I had no, I was in university, so I was away from my family, my parents. I was like by myself with my friends, like kind of, I don't have any children, didn't have any responsibilities. So in some ways I don't want to say in every way, it was a completely intellectual, independent decision. Yeah. I didn't think at all about the consequences. I didn't think at all about anything. It was just, and alhamdulillah, my family was very accepting. When I told them, I think they were, at first they were like, they were nice about it, but they thought it was a phase, and they were like, okay, that's great, but they were always really supportive. In fact, my father used to say that becoming Muslim was the best thing that I did, that I became a much better person. I stopped drinking alcohol. I started to be a better son. I started to be a better brother to my sisters. I was always with my mother and making sure she was okay, and she had somebody to sit with and talk to her. So I think I became a much better person, definitely, when I became Muslim. And so my family saw that, and they always said, they still to this day, say that this was a very good decision for me. And they've always been respectful. And I'm grateful for that, because there's a lot of people who they become Muslim and their families are not accepting.
Yeah, in Bosnia, that's pretty common, to be honest.
Yeah, so alhamdulillah, I was very fortunate.
Yeah. Like you said, your family, alhamdulillah, they accepted. How did the environment reacted to your decision, your friends?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. So it took me a long time to realize this. I didn't lose, I maybe lost one friend. But I think he had his own problems. I think it was less to do with me than with him. And he did this to a lot of our friends, so he kind of like cut them off. But what's interesting is my friends are still my friends, which is, I kind of, so I think when I first became Muslim, I was obviously like really excited about being Muslim, and I talked about it all the time. And I was thinking, suddenly I realized, like, wow, if I saw this happen to my friend, I would think like, this is really weird. I don't know, but they all stuck with me as my friend. So I feel very complimented by that. Like, it's a big honor for me that—
Yeah, it is actually.
That they, I didn't think about it, but I realized, like, these people actually probably got together and said, hey, what's going on with this guy? Is this okay? And I don't know if they had a meeting or not, but they have all been my friends, and I'm grateful for that. And of course, then I made lots of new friends, all my Muslim friends. So I got to keep my friends, and I got a whole new world of friends. I'm very grateful.
Yeah. After you became a Muslim, after you graduated, and after that, you traveled the world.
Yeah.
And met a lot of Muslims in a lot of different countries. What is the same for all of them? And what is the different? What you thought, what you learned in that experience?
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting, actually. There is not much people doing that way. Oh, that's like old-fashioned way.
Yeah. So There's one thing I should add actually to the previous question, which is that I became Muslim in 1997, so it was before 9/11. I mean, obviously there was still in the U.S. this idea of Muslims like as terrorists and stuff, but it wasn't like after 9/11. I think that I'm trying to remember. I actually can't remember that time very well, but sometimes I felt a little bit isolated, but it wasn't because of the politics or, it was more sometimes I felt like I didn't fit in that well with my family. Like we would have, like I just felt a little bit different from my family members, but this was, I think, just normal kind of growing pains. It didn't cause a lot of problems for me. And then, okay, so about traveling, I've been to lots of parts of the Muslim world, and I had always had wonderful experiences. I think one thing I would say is consistent for Muslims everywhere in the world that is they're very hospitable, that there's this real commitment to honoring your guests. And I've felt so cared for and, taken care of. And, some places people would literally try to give you their clothes. And I remember one of my first teacher who ever taught me any Arabic was this Turkish man. And one time I said, I was like, oh, your tie, I like your tie. It's a nice tie. And he's like, here, I'll give it to you. And I was like shocked. I was like, no, I can't. I mean, I was surprised that no one's ever. And that's something I've tried to learn as a Muslim and to practice myself, is to be hospitable. This is something, generosity, hospitality are things that are universally present amongst Muslims and not present amongst a lot of, it is not universal amongst all human beings. Let me put it that way, right? So that's something I've noticed. The love of knowledge, the idea that, for example, I get invited to Muslim communities and, all over the world. And the idea that somebody would want a professor to come and talk to them, and the kids and teenagers would want to come and hear a professor. That's sort of kind of unusual. Like even Muslims who are not really serious about their religion, even Muslims who are not really committed to learning about their religion, they still have this respect for knowledge, and they kind of want to hear someone who's knowledgeable. And that's always surprised me. That's like a really, again, a blessing and not normal. Like that is not normal for human beings. So that's something I'd say is also very consistent.
Yeah, but when I think about that, I would say this just because we Muslims, no matter if we practice or not, is that we know the worth of knowledge.
Yeah,
and that's why we actually respect everyone who have some knowledge, no matter it's religious knowledge or some other knowledge. That's something like I haven't thought about that before, but
yeah, I think that's true. They appreciate knowledge.
Yeah. What was like that experience for you? You taught Islam in that old-fashioned way. Let's say old-fashioned way. It's not like anyone would travel the world.
Taught or studied?
Study.
Yeah. So when I learned about Islam in the university, I learned from the perspective of what you might call an Islamic modernist perspective. So Muhammad Asad's books are, they're an Islamic modernist perspective. So for him, and I read the books of Fazl Rahman and Muhammad Abdu, and that perspective, it looks at the kind of ulama either as sort of they're kind of ignorant, they're a barrier to progress. The ulama of the past were great, but in the present, they're kind of, they've declined and they're sort of backward. So I didn't actually think about Islamic knowledge as a living tradition. It was something that you kind of studied in the past, and then kind of intellectuals today were supposed to move forward. And it wasn't till I was in graduate school. Actually, I went to Cairo to learn Arabic after my university, 2000 to 2001. And one of my teachers in college, she told me about these professors, these shuyukh who taught in Al-Azhar. And she told me to go, go to this person's lesson and go to this person's lesson. I'll write introduction for you. And I went and I realized that this is actually a living tradition. Like these are really impressive scholars. They're not only extremely critical thinkers, they're very good analysts, but they also memorize enormous. So they have this sort of data bank of knowledge. They have intellectual capacity to analyze it and use it. And I realized, like, wow, this is a living tradition you can actually study from. And so I mean, I don't know, sometimes I regret this. I'm not sure what the right thing to do was, but like a lot of people who become Muslim or even young Muslims, they go and they study, in Istanbul or in Al-Azhar or in Syria, right? And they do like madrasa basically, and for me, I only did that in the summers or in like 1 year, 1 year here, 8 months there. So my training in that way was very limited. It was only, get the basics in some sciences. In some sciences, I did more advanced studies, but I never did like a consistent, traditional study. So that I learned a lot and it helped me a lot as a Muslim. It helped me. It made me confident as a Muslim because what I realized was, there's people studying, let's say, Islam in the U.S. in the universities. I realized, they would kind of sometimes look down on ulama and like these people, they're kind of backward and they're not critical thinkers. They're sort of, we're the kind of possessors of knowledge now. We kind of correct them and analyze them. And what I realized is that these, like a great scholar in Egypt at Azhar, for example, knows 100,000 times more than, a professor in the United States. And I realized like that these were the people I wanted to be like, these ulama, these were the people. I mean, look, not everybody, right? So if you go to a university, University of Sarajevo or anywhere, or Georgetown University, let's say there's 2,000 professors. Most of those professors are probably not that impressive. Like there's below average, there's average, and there's above average, right?
Yeah.
So same thing with ulama. There's below average, there's above average.
Yeah.
So if you experience below average, then you're going to have a bad experience. If you experience average, then you'll, it's okay.
It's okay.
But when you meet above average and exceptional people, then you realize what this tradition has at its best. And so I think when I met those people, it gave me a role model to try and be like. But of course, I had already like kind of gone on the path of being a professor, like doing a PhD and being a professor in the West. So what I've tried to do is to kind of combine as best I can these two traditions to offer to my students and to readers in English or in the West, offer them the best of the Islamic tradition, and then to kind of translate that and express that in a kind of modern Western format.
Yeah. You came back to America. You started working.
Yeah.
Do non-Muslims in America show interest in learning about Islam?
Non-Muslims?
Yeah, like regular people.
Yeah.
Neighbors and stuff.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of experience with regular people in the sense that, usually because I'm, like if I meet some random person let's say on the airplane or something.
Yeah.
My name is, Jonathan Brown, and I look like an average white guy. So they don't say, oh, where are you from? Or what's your religion? They just assume I'm like, in fact, sometimes they might even say stuff like, yeah, I don't really like Muslims or something. They might say they don't know. And then I'd say, oh, really? Is that, maybe you should rethink this. But so I think that my interactions with normal people are usually have nothing to do with Islam, just because there's no reason for them to bring that up with me. Sometimes, I mean, it's kind of funny because one time I was at like a flower store, like buying flowers.
Yeah.
And the woman ahead of me in line, she got all these flowers, and she had her kids with her, and she was going to pay for the flowers, and she realized she didn't have her wallet. And I'm telling this, I'm not bragging. I'm giving you an example.
Yeah.
So what came through my mind was like all these times I'd been in like Sarajevo, and someone was like insisted on buying me food or treating me hospitably or whatever, all these experiences I'd had. And so I said, don't worry, I'll pay for it, and she was shocked. So like, this is in America, like unbelievable, And so she was shocked. And then she said, like, is there anything I can do for you? Please let me do something. And I just said, I went and I was like, pray for me. And she was kind of, she was kind of shocked because this is, suburban Washington, D.C. It's not, it's very educated. It's not like you're in the deep South with everyone talking about the Bible all the time, right? So maybe she thought I was Christian. I have no idea what she thought, but that was like the one time maybe I've like in an interaction with somebody, I've kind of brought this side out of me. Yeah. I'd say that for, put it this way, the people who come to my classes or my lectures, and most of them are not Muslim, obviously. I mean, my classes are usually, let's say, if I have, 75 students in a, let's say, Islamic history class, about maybe 6 will be Muslim, and the rest are, like, 5 are Muslim and 70 of them are not Muslim, right? So and it's interesting because you could see it kind of happens in waves. So kind of after 9/11, there's this huge interest. So I started graduate school 5 days after. I started graduate school on September 15th, 2001. And so my whole coming out of grad school and being grad school was in this world of people wanting to know about Islam. Like, what's going on? Who are these people? Why do they hate us? Et cetera, et cetera. So there was that where that kind of drove people's interest. And then there was like kind of the Arab Spring, people got interested in that. Yeah. And then there was, like ISIS, and then people got interested in that. Yeah. And now it's, like, for example, what's happening in Gaza, and people are interested in how people, their faith in Islam is giving them strength. So there's always something going on. Yeah. Or there was during Trump's time, there was, Trump's Muslim ban and, Islamophobia in America. People were interested in that. So there's always something that's keeping up interest in Islam amongst non-Muslims. Yeah. So they're always, not all of them, but like some of them obviously hate Islam or don't care. Yeah. But there's a certain percentage that want to know, even if they don't intend to become Muslim or they don't even want to like Islam, they still want to know about what's going on in the world, or who are these people, what is this religion.
Yeah, but that's also important, not just because, as you said, they don't have to become a Muslims. It's just important to understand that something that's happening is not Islam. It's something like...
So it's interesting. When I think about teaching like, for example, this Islamic world, it's called Islamic world. It's, Islamic civilization in one semester. So I don't write this in the course description, but when I think about what I want out of the class, I want people to think about Muslims and Islam as they would think about other people. Like, just treat Muslims like normal people, So if something good happens, it can be because of religion or because of not religion, or something bad happens. Maybe it's because it's like Muslims are human beings, and just think of them like other human beings. So that's if I've gotten them to do that, then I feel like I've succeeded.
Yeah. What did Islam bring to your life? You said previously that your father said that you became a better son, better brother. Is there anything else that maybe Islam bring to your life? What?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to quantify that or how to list it. It's, I mean, it gave me a purpose. It made me connected to my Creator. It gave me peace. It gave me a drive to learn. It gave me passion to teach, passion to write. It gave me commitment to my family and to even when I'm upset at them or don't like them, to make me do my duty as a son or a brother or whatever, or a nephew. It made me, it gave me a whole community of people that are wonderful. And, Muslims that are very hard on themselves. They're always like, oh, we're Muslims, we're disorganized, we can't do anything, we're always late, etc. Muslims are really actually wonderful people in general. I mean, there's always, obviously not everybody's good, but I mean, just in general, I don't know. I mean, I go like hang out around, non-Muslim Americans. I would definitely rather be around Muslims for sure, 100%, 100%. And, so, and then what else? I mean, it gave me a job. I mean, my job is a professor teaching Islamic history. It gave me a passion. As I said, it gave me passion. It gave me a chance to travel. It gave me, I don't even know where to, it saved me from being almost certainly like a functional alcoholic, which is probably what I would have been. I don't know. It saved me from hopelessness. I remember when my mother died, I never felt like I was obviously devastated, but I never felt that something wrong had happened. I said Alhamdulillah and Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and I was always at peace with it. It didn't break me.
Yeah, I understand.
So that is a tremendous gift. So I can go on and on.
Yeah, that's actually a lot of things that Islam actually brings to people's life, any other life. To be honest, every story I heard about reverting to Islam is different, but have some same things. When it comes to, you mentioned peace. Yeah. Everyone I ask what Islam brings to your life, they say peace.
Yeah,
I believe that this is something that is pretty important, because you don't appreciate peace in your life until you actually have it.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that I'm not sure. I think maybe because converts get asked so much about how you became Muslim, which by the way is fine. Like I don't blame other people for asking me. It's fine. But I think because I think converts don't ever ask one another why they become Muslims. Like I have lots of convert friends. I've never asked them how they became. They've never asked me. So it's weird. I probably don't. You probably know a lot more about the experience of people becoming Muslims than I do. I don't really know why my friends became Muslim or what it did for them. So I'm interested to hear that that this idea of peace is a consistent
actually every
theme.
Story I heard, since we had maybe 10 of them filmed already, everyone I asked, what is something that Islam brings to your life? For me personally, that's something that is pretty important, because you have to know what your decision is bringing to you, what will happen after that. And all of them, no excuses, said peace. One of the things, of course, there are many other things, but peace is something that is actually that everyone felt after becoming a Muslim.
I mean, I think it's important that people understand that peace doesn't mean bad things don't happen to you. Peace means that you are at peace. You can be at peace with what happens to you, right? So that and that's not submission. That doesn't mean submissiveness to the world. Like it's not like, oh, I'm kind of passive, I don't do anything. But the world around you is not a
final destination.
It's not inherently a crisis, right? It's not inherently a crisis. The world around you is as it should be in the end. Like it's ultimately something that you can deal with.
My final question for you would be, if someone in Bosnia, America, no matter where, is someone who is on the verge of converting to Islam, and the person approached to you and asked for some advice or a message, what would you say to that person? What is your message for those who may be watching this episode on that thinking of becoming a Muslim or staying on to some other side or something? What would be your message for those people?
Yeah. Well, I remember when I became Muslim, these guys from other students at the university, we drove together to the local mosque, and one guy, you know, he maybe doesn't know that I still remember this thing he said. He said, "Don't ever forget why you became Muslim." You know, which is, I think that's a very important point, because, you know, as you, I think sometimes people they think that, I don't know, maybe they don't think this, maybe I'm just imagining it, but I worry that people, they become Muslim and they think that, you know, they're never going to experience anything bad, or they're not going to meet someone who's a liar or something, you know. Yeah. And you're going to encounter things that are confusing, that you don't like, and maybe you don't like them because you have to change, or maybe you don't like them because that thing is bad, right? But, you know, you always have to remember what pushed you, what drove you in the beginning, and what you're after, what you're seeking. That's very important. And as time goes on, you know, you will change as a person, and you change as a Muslim. Like I mean, when I first became Muslim, it was very intellectual. Yeah. It's very hard for me to like be religious, to like do, you know, to sort of talk about my feelings. So I was just very intellectual about it. Later on, I became much more comfortable with like being kind of feeling religious feeling, you know, feeling iman, doing like dhikr, doing dua, things like that and so you kind of go through changes, you know, as you become a parent, you become a different Muslim teaching your children, and or being a spouse, but you know, so I don't mean to think that you always live in that original moment, but that thing that pushed you in the beginning, that no one can take that away from you, and no one should take it away from you. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. And I would also say, you know, that, you know, you might go through feelings of being isolated or alienated from the world you knew, but that this is natural. Like this is a small price to pay. It's a small price to pay. And also, you know, you don't have to, you know, for example, like my family, even though they were very accepting of me being Muslim, like, you know, a lot of my activities with them, I did, even though maybe I felt like I wasn't enjoying it, I was like, I have a duty to spend time with them, you know, silat rahim, and that, you know, you don't always have to feel like you have so much in common with them, even though you're with them and you're loving them and you're spending time with them. Yeah, you're going to feel different from them, but that's normal. Like that, you don't have to, that, you know, you don't lose your family just because you feel different from them. Yeah,
of course. Professor Brown, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience and knowledge. I strongly believe that all of followers who will be watching this episode will have a lot to learn from you and your experience. Thank you so much one more time for your time.
It's my pleasure and honor to do this.
Yeah, and of course I wish you a very pleasant stay in Sarajevo for.
I'm gonna eat a lot of food.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Dear followers, thank you for watching this episode. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.